Hello, my name is Spencer Bordonaro, and I designed the pen carousel, which is used to store pens and pencils in a unique way. My first step was designing and cutting the two pieces that are going to make up the stand. Using an 1/8" piece of acrylic, I began by marking out the dimensions I sketched in CAD. I then moved on to cut a rough shape using the bandsaw. The outer perimeter proved to be pretty easy to cut, however, when cutting a slot in the center, it was difficult to get the edges smooth. After cutting, I took the piece to the sander to flatten out the perimeter edges. Lastly, I went back to the bandsaw to cut the notches out from the feet. This proved to be a bit tricky to get the cuts even. Here is the result. One has a slot at the top and the other has it at the bottom. This will allow them to fit together during assembly. Next, I needed to make the feet of the build, which would be made from silicone. I decided to do this by designing and 3D printing a mold for these feet. After mixing the silicone, I slowly worked it into the mold, making sure each cavity was filled. A day later, the silicone was cured and I was able to work it out of the mold. The final piece I needed to make was the carousel itself, which I would do through vacuum forming. Here, I am assembling the frame for the ABS plastic sheet I will be using. The sheet is 1 foot by 1 foot and will be stapled down to the frame. Next, I needed to make the vacuum former itself. I began by cutting out a rectangle from a sheet of perf board and drilling a grid of holes in it. Once completed, I sealed and taped the board to a cardboard box that had a hole for a vacuum tube. Here is the 3D printed part I am going to form over. However, to capture the detail of the slots, I figured I would need to drill some holes in them. This was a bit tedious, but sometime later I had holes in all the slots and I think it turned out well. With all the pieces ready, it was time to vacuum form. I began by heating the plastic in the oven. I took many attempts with various methods to try and capture the detail of the slots. However, on the 5th attempt, I figured I ended up with the best version I could get. I then went about cutting out the formed part with a Dremel. I also trimmed up the edges and imperfections as best I could. Finally, for the assembly, I started by gluing the silicone feet to the acrylic stands. With all the feet glued on, the final steps were to put the stands together and rest the carousel on top. Thank you for watching.